Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
everybody.
Hello, Heather. Hello, Angela. Hello, Barbie. How are you?
Hi, good doing well. How are you, Jason?
Good. Angela, it was nice seeing you just yesterday in
I know.
Orlando. That was
Oh,
fantastic.
cool.
So
Yeah, I
Angela
could get
was,
used to you being closer.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Angela was at the Sherm, Florida, and I was at the Sherm, Florida, doing a little presentation, and so we got to catch up in person, and that was fun, along with Ray. So it was great seeing you. About what how many people went there? About 1,400 people were at that conference.
That's what
Wow.
I heard. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great conference. People are super friendly. Love the facility that is in the Rosen Plaza there, or sorry, the Rosen Shingle Creek. It's a really great facility. So that
it
was a lot
is.
of fun.
Yeah.
Um, this topic, it almost makes me laugh if I say the title. Like, I don't know how to say the title without not laughing. So maybe one of you should say the title.
Yeah. I
Barbie, you
thought we
tell
were
us the
playing
title.
Truth or Dare.
Yeah, Barbie, tell us what the title is because I want to laugh if I say it.
Okay, human resources making you miserable?
Doesn't it make everybody miserable? Isn't that just like, doesn't everybody just dislike HR? I mean, isn't that the problem?
I hope not.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's true. Yeah, it is. Okay,
well, I
so you go ahead. Go ahead, Barbie.
oh no, I was gonna say I like how it says inadvertently.
Mhm.
Inadvertently, exactly,
Like
exactly.
accidentally.
Well, this was from a Wall Street Journal article that was written a couple of weeks ago about how HR can inadvertently create a negative work environment, and then how people have worked with HR and it has just made their life miserable, and people haven't liked going to HR, haven't liked dealing with them, felt like it made their whole situation worse, was the premise of the article. So, Angela or Barbie, I'll let you jump in first to see your thoughts around it.
Barbie, do you want to go?
Well, I think, I can, but I don't think it's certainly not my intent. I guess I can only speak for myself and the HR people that I lead, but it's certainly not my intent to make people's work environment more negative. I do think that a lot of times HR people can put process ahead of judgment and actually thinking about the people. So, for example, I'm not a big fan of PIPs and making managers go through the process of waiting 90 days after they've already made their decision to take action on an employee, right? But I do want to make sure that the manager has given feedback, has set expectations, have provided coaching. But if they've done that, I don't want to do the kind of CYA move of great, you did all the right things. Now I'm going to have you go through this additional process. So I think that's one example that HR can hold managers back from being the best they can be. But in the same token, sometimes they can be useful for managers who don't do their job correctly and don't provide that feedback and set those expectations. So we're always kind of walking a tightrope of really trying to do what's right for the employees, which should in turn be right for the company because the company is only successful if their employees are successful. But sometimes that tightrope that we walk between legal, between what our CEO wants us to do, and between what the employees want us to do are all very different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just add to that that the risk tolerance in the organization drives so much of how HR has to show up and navigate. And so when you think about aligning even your risk management approach to the culture and values, we can do whatever an organization wants. Technically, it's just at what cost? At cost
Mhm.
either, to bottom line, it's brand impact, it's the
Yeah,
ability to, attract and recruit top talent. So, the intent here is to always safeguard and protect and align with the values and the mission. I think it just gets misunderstood in the process in which it happens and maybe in how it's communicated too. Just, really getting back to the core of why are we here, who do we serve, and what's uh, how far are we willing to go to preserve what matters most within the organization, because I think that's ultimately what, Barbie, you just said HR is there to do, hoping that there's alignment between the people and the company and the brand.
one of the things that I know that used to drive people crazy is when they would come to me and they would say, "I want to talk to you about something, but you have to agree that this is confidential." And I would tell them, "I can't agree to that. Like, I can't I can't give you confidentiality, a blanket confidentiality over everything before you come and talk to me. And they'd be like, come on, man, what do you mean? I'm like, well, if you tell me that there's something going on, there are some things that I have to take action on, and I can't not do something about it. And that used to just drive people crazy about the fact that, well, why can't I go there and you just talk to me confidentially about it? And that used to just bug people so much. And those are the kinds of things that happen in HR that I think people just get really frustrated with, even though you're doing the right thing for the company by, if you hear a problem like quid pro quo sexual harassment that you're going to have to take action on. Um, the employee gets upset because they feel like you should be in their corner to be able to protect them, and sometimes you are, but you also got to look out for the company.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it's best is to be very upfront about, hey, look, I have a duty to act in certain situations, and be honest about that. But I also find a question that is sometimes very helpful is, what do you hope to accomplish by talking to me about this? Right? If you want to accomplish a change in leadership because of some bad actors, then how do we accomplish that without me doing an investigation or moving forward or coaching that leader? Right? If you want to accomplish just a coaching session to how you're going to address this yourself, I'm a big fan of that. I'm very happy to coach you of how to have the conversation or discussion if you want to have it yourself. But then you need to expect that I'm going to follow up with you and see if you did. And if you were candid with the person as you were with me. But obviously, there's certain things that I have a legal duty to act and just be transparent about that and let them know that it's not just about protecting you, Angela, when you're speaking to me, but it's also about protecting Heather, who might work for this manager next month, right? Or, and so really, really talking through some of that, I think is helpful. But it's still, at the end of the day, what do you hope to accomplish by having this conversation, right? If it's just to vent, then maybe go vent to your partner outside the
Yeah.
company. But if it's to have real action and change be implemented, then let's act together to do what's right for the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many of these things can be solved by communication. There's so many of these
Mhm.
things where employees and managers, regardless of the level that you're at, just don't communicate very well. And then they come to HR and they say, you need to solve this problem for me, do this. And then you ask them, well, have you had a conversation with your manager, to your point, Barbie? Like, well, no, I've never talked to that person about it. Well, then why are you coming talking to me? If you need tools on how to communicate to your manager, I'll give you tools on how to communicate. I'll help you structure the conversation. I'll help you figure it out. But you got to go talk. And then the other thing that's always a problem for employees that I found, and they used to get so upset with me when I would say this, but to your point, I thought it was the right thing to say is at the end of the day, the only person's perception that matters is your manager's perception. So if your manager has a very poor perception of you and your manager's manager has a very poor perception of you, and there's not a great organizational perception of you, no matter how great you think you are, you need to figure out how you manage the perception of you better in the organization. And
Yeah.
that used to just floor people that they actually had to think about how they were coming across to others, not just how they felt about themselves, and how
Hmm.
they felt like they were coming across. So it was a little
Yeah.
bit of hard love, but people who got it, it really helped them. And people who didn't get it, they were the ones that really had a hard time making the cut.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that in most cases they are looking to HR to be the problem solver, and I think by coming to you, then the monkey's off my back, and now I'm firmly planting it on yours to go fix, and then I, want to return back to normal, and it's, you know, uh, to come and speak out first. I mean, it takes incredible courage even to ask HR to have a conversation. So, I certainly applaud that, but along with that comes a responsibility to do something. Barbie, I think you said that really well. Like, let's figure out how to do it together so that I can help support you. But ultimately, this is your situation to navigate through. You're just there to help provide options and support. um,
Mm.
but I can see where people would think that's really difficult. If I came to you expecting for you to just go and do it or fix it, and now you're making me like go have a conversation and go talk to the person. I mean, that doesn't sound very fun. If I was
Yeah.
hoping just to transition the ownership.
Yeah. I can't solve your marriage problems. I can't solve your parenting problems, and I can't solve the problem if you have an issue with a relationship with your manager, right? You need to be doing that. We're adults. And we need to handle things like adults. But, HR can definitely help you. And I'm the kind of HR person that I don't feel my job stops at the company. So if I'm your HR person right now, if I'm your HR person at Safe Security, for example, and we terminate you or you quit, and 2 years later you reach out to me for advice or help on something, I'm still there for you, right? Once you meet me, you never get to unknow me. And alumni networks are very strong and important too. So HR people not being disingenuous about actually caring about employees, because if you really cared about them, why do you stop caring when they leave the company?
Yeah.
That's really
So,
nice. I really like that.
yeah.
Well,
That's
it
a
does
really
say a lot about
mm,
your culture and your brand, how you treat people on the exit and then what
Mhm.
happens when they reach out to you. I mean, especially, as an HR person, you've got your own brand and,
Yeah.
in most cases you've developed such strong relationships with people. It does mean a lot that even after they leave, they feel like they do have a bond and some type of a connection that they'd even be comfortable reaching out. So,
Mhm.
I like the first bullet, how HR can inadvertently create a negative work environment. One of my thoughts is when you just heavily over rotate on doing anything that management wants you to do. Like literally, if you're just management says jump and you just say how high. At that point, if you're doing that as an HR team, I think you've probably pretty much lost the non-management. That would be my I've seen that before, but I don't know what you think, Angela and Barbie, but that would be one that I would put out there.
yeah, well, I think there's a tendency for HR to try to just say yes. I mean, there are implications in the workplace if, we're seen as the people who say no. So I think it's a tough spot to be in to have to make that choice for sure. But I, also find you got to pick your battles. Is this one I am going to just say yes to and green light through, or is this one that I'm going to need to stand my ground on and work
Yeah.
through it in a different way?
Yeah, it's really difficult. You have to be able to influence your executive team and your CEO and your leaders, and you do have to pick your battles of what you want to influence on. But it's very difficult to be a chief people officer where you sometimes leadership wants to shoot the messenger, right? If you're saying employees are dissatisfied with this and they're not happy with that, then the CEO gets mad at you for telling them that message, and they say they're data driven, but they don't want to see the data. and then and then other times, they're very receptive and saying, okay, go solve it. But it's like, okay, well, you have to understand that you set the tone for the company and you need to be part of the solution. We're in a very difficult situation of walking that fine line between not being deferential to our leadership, but also delivering on what our leadership expects of us. Right. And that's a fine line to walk. But I think one of the biggest things that HR does that's can lead to a negative work environment is over surveying and then not listening to the feedback. So don't do an employee satisfaction survey if you're not going to do anything with the employee satisfaction survey. I mean, to me, that's just a colossal waste of the employee's time. It's a waste of your department's time to roll it out and administer it if you're not actually going to absorb what was given and communicate back to the workforce and make some decisions for the company. So I think a lot of companies do over survey without action. And I think that can lead to a lot of distrust in the organization. We spoke up, we told you what we think. And even if there's not, and it's so important to circle back with the employees, because even if it's not the majority and one person said, you provide Pepsi in the refrigerator, but I want Coke, it's still important to say, look, we heard you and we're not doing anything about it. It's still because the employees want to feel like they're heard. So, and what I think is a great question to add to surveys is not just the agree or disagree, but add a selection that says this isn't relevant to the success of the business. The whole
Oh,
asking me this question is not relevant to the success of the business, and let employees give you feedback of why are you asking me if I want Coke or Pepsi? It's not relevant, right? And that can show the organization too and help you understand what the focus is for your team.
yeah, we've talked about this a lot since we started our company, which is we don't really even think you should do those big census surveys anymore. They're just a waste of time. A small 5 to max, maybe even 10 question survey, that's a pulse survey that you do on a fairly regular basis to understand how things are going. That's really what you should be doing. These these census surveys, just like you said, set up yourself for failure and
Mhm.
and don't really help much other than set employees' expectations and they get them mad when they're not met.
Yeah. but you get to do a mark off of I did it. We launched a survey and we went up or
Yeah.
down. You get to you get
Yeah.
to look at
We spent our $150,000 that we budgeted for this. Here
yeah,
are the
yeah,
results. Here you
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
So what
Well,
if you go ahead,
oh,
Angela?
yeah, no, I was just going to add, I think one of the other pitfalls that we also sort of danced around too is just the role of the manager in the process. If I, as HR, step in and do it for you, and I'm not helping to transition skills and capability and enable you to do it next time, then I'm recreating this situation in every single interaction. So, and that's where even, saying yes, say no, choosing your battles, but also working with that intent to help them serve themselves in the future versus, you being the go-to for all, because they've got to manage their people on the day to day. You're not there to do that. And so, being able to equip them is something we have to be very intentional about in our
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah,
And
that's a really
every
good point. Go
Yeah, it's
ahead,
a really
Hillary.
good point because every company that we work with as HR leaders, whether full-time or fractional or consulting, is a different company, a different culture, and different people. So when an HR person comes in and has their little toolkit and, this is the way GE did it, so this is the way we should all do it, that's a real disservice for the company that you're working with. It's always a huge red flag to me when companies want to work with me because of Netflix, right? Make us Netflix. We want to be just like Netflix. Netflix's culture is so famous. Like, no, you don't. You want Netflix's stock price over the years, but you don't really want Netflix's culture. And so, really helping companies find their own voice and the HR person not just coming in and saying, okay, I've seen the movie, I'm going to redirect the same movie. Every time you go, every company is a new movie. So you need to be open to doing things differently and not doing the same things the same way every time. And I think a lot of HR people have a problem with that. They have their comfort zone of what they like to do, and they just try to roll it out at too many companies that aren't going to benefit from it.
Well, yeah, that's the whole I have a cookie cutter template or a cookie cutter approach to doing everything, and I'm just gonna put this cookie cutter approach in, and it's gonna work. And it's somewhat lazy in nature. It's not taking into account all of the things that you're talking about. Like each company is a separate entity and has a specific way of wanting to do things. What you're talking about is I'm putting effort and energy and being creative and making something different happen in this organization. What it's all about, and that's why people love working with you, because you're doing that and you're making a huge impact. You're just not putting the same thing out there over and over again.
Mhm.
Hoping it
I
works.
always I always used to get frustrated when we would build programs or we would build trainings around the lowest skilled employees or the lowest skilled managers, or we were always managing to the people that were at the bottom of the of the they were at the bottom of the curve, or at the low end of the curve rather. And I would be like, why should we do that? We should be managing all of our processes and everything that we're doing to the top end of the curve. And if the bottom end can't basically get on board and can't figure it out, then we need to manage them out. But we need to be focusing on the top. And I would always hate it when we manage to the bottom, because I think it would just make the organization not as competent, and it would basically take it down. And we used to see that a lot, and so I always tried to force us to not do that.
Mhm. That's
Yeah,
good.
it's a great point. But the ones on the bottom are generally the ones that are causing the most angst and challenge. And so it just feels like the right thing to do. But the intuitive, or it's anti intuitive to focus on those that, there's the biggest potential for them to make the greatest difference.
Yeah, and that is what makes the organization a lot more dynamic and a good place to work, is when you're focusing on those people that are at the top driving you forward, as opposed
Yeah.
to those of you that are making you not as effective. Now, Heather and I had one that we could throw into how can HR create a negative work environment. We had the one this week, or the last 2 weeks, of the organization where the leader doesn't ever talk to anybody in the organization. Like, it's been a year since they had a conversation with most of their clients that they serve. Heather, do you
How's
have
that
thoughts on
working
that
for
one?
them?
Heather, yeah, you're on mute. Do you have that? Yeah, how's that working, Heather?
Yeah, not working so well. I mean, it's talk about red flags, and we did this interview with the stakeholder, and And she
They
made the
hold.
comment that she had not talked to the director. They'd not communicated in over a year. I think Jason and I just about fell out of our seats, but we also weren't surprised because we could tell the person was um, underperforming anyway. And I think that was some of the feedback we got from some other people. But
Yeah, it was
gosh,
virtually all the stakeholders that we had talked to said, "No, I haven't talked to that person in a year." I'm like,
and
"Oh,
then you've
well,
got the other side where, the HR leadership that spend more time, too much time, circling around and gossiping. I've seen that a number of times, you know, and one of my parts of my career where we had an HR person that she couldn't seem to get anything done, which was a frustration for everybody. It's because she spent more time walking around, gossiping than doing her work. And when she left and we brought someone new in, she was done with her work by noon every day because she focused and then could spend the time walking around and seeing how people are doing. So you could have like one extreme or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that actually, it hurts to hear because I just imagine working in that type of an environment. And I've seen individuals that work that way too. And, I think one of the ultimate responsibilities we have is we've got to be willing to confront. I mean, if we're going to be in our roles and serve in this capacity, then we've got to be the epitome of the brand and what we stand for. And if we're making it okay to walk around and gossip about one another, I can imagine the reputation of the manager or HR in an organization like that.
Mhm.
And that all is just an absolute recipe for disaster. It's a big responsibility. I mean, this
Yeah.
work is definitely not for the weak. I mean, we've got to be so strong in so many ways and be okay with not necessarily being liked by everyone. I mean, if you're really standing for something, then people aren't going to like you. And I think when think that you've got to be accepted and that you've got to be everyone's friend, that's where the mistakes come in because we've got a higher purpose in calling than that.
I got kicked off the Cisco bowling team because I was in HR. I
Because
went
you
Really?
were
Yeah,
you weren't fun.
it was the after hours Cisco bowling team, and so I showed up because I really liked bowling, and and they said, "No, you can't bowl with us. We don't want somebody from HR spying on us on our free time, so you
Oh, that's
can't."
terrible. They didn't do that to me on the softball team.
Yeah, yeah, I guess my reputation preceded me for some reason. I don't know. Yeah, but they kicked me off. They're like, "Yeah, sorry, you can't be on there." I'm like, "Okay." And I guess bowling, well, I guess you drink a lot of beer at softball too. So I don't know what happened, but yeah, I always remember that. It was always very stood out to me how much people disliked HR when they kicked me off the bowling team.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it just makes you wonder, like, what on earth are you doing, really, if HR can't be here? Just like, wow.
yeah, exactly, exactly, for sure. Well, I think these are all really, really good. And I think that, we are I think one of the things that Barbie just said, and what you also said, Angela, and I think Barbie is very, very good at doing this as well as Angela, is that sometimes you do have to take a stand. You do have to be able to articulate the vision of the company. You do have to articulate if you're going through a culture change. You do have to identify and talk to people about why we're going through a culture change. You can't be a good HR person unless you can help lead and bring people forward, and Barbie does that very well, and I know you do that very well, Angela. I know Barbie, we had to do a lot of that when we worked at Cisco, and we sort of had a culture change after, the first layoff that we did, and some of the other things happened where we had to retrench, and so you had to get in there and really show managers what the new way of doing things was going to be, and that was hard because they really resisted that.
Mhm.
But I think that's really important. So why do you think you're so good at that, Barbie? Why do you think that that's such a good strong skill of yours as an HR person?
I don't know. I think that part of it might be laziness. I fundamentally feel like as an HR leader, my job isn't to grow my empire, but it's to develop amazing leaders and managers. And that means showing them and being a model for them in the behavior. That means coaching, that means developing them. I think a mistake that HR people make is to try to be the problem solver for everybody. And that's a lot to do. So teaching people how to solve their own problems and teaching people how to chart their own paths not only makes our jobs more rewarding, but it also gives us more time to do some of the more strategic things as well. So I think that I fundamentally believe that my number one job as a chief people officer is to make sure the leaders are the absolute best leaders they can possibly be for the company, because that's going to impact the employees the most. Now, I want good benefit plans, and I'm the kind of HR person that doesn't want to overdo perks because perks become entitlements, and there's all that kind of stuff that's not as, strategic. But the best thing that we can do is to give every employee at the company an amazing manager and amazing leadership.
That's really well said. Angela, how do you think you've developed that skill? Why do you think you're good at that? What are the things that you think have made you very skillful in that
Yeah,
capacity?
I mean, honestly, yeah, I think the biggest thing is probably being results driven. Being able to connect in and see what are the outcomes we're striving to achieve and having that focus and intent. I think then the behaviors and the things that you do and choose not to do align with that. And I think, secondly, just being courageous. I think it's just something that's naturally been something that if I think it, generally I say it, I'm toned down. So I certainly know, how to manage exactly what I say. But I think just, always being willing to confront what others won't talk about and bringing the elephants out. I think that's
Hmm.
just been something that I'm completely comfortable with.
Yeah.
And where other people would run from it, which I think, again, it can make you unliked and can make things difficult at times, but, eventually, it's the light shines when you get through some of the darker places.
And so much of this comes just from experience, Jason. So when you're working with small companies, they might have an HR leader in place that doesn't have as much experience, so hasn't gained as much confidence, right? But when you've had experience in life where you've had to change, where you've had to shift, where you've been the one to feel the hit and to go through that and know how it feels, understand it, and understand what it could help you go through it, then you can help do it better for other people. Right. So it's not just having positive experiences, and it's not just experience in terms of title and things, but it's experience in the experiences you've actually had when things were quote done to you and now you're doing it to others, to do it better. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how many times have I said over the years, and how many times has Heather heard me say, I got burned by this once before. I'm never gonna do this ever. Like, we're not doing this because this burned me bad. Like, I've
Yeah.
learned, stove hot. That's my favorite,
Yeah.
analogy. If the stove's hot, I'm not doing it again because I don't. I know what's gonna happen. But that's a really good point. Is once you've been under the fire of things, and you've had to deal with it, you're gonna basically help other people figure it out. So okay, one thing to
Mhm.
wrap up our conversation, Angela, what do you have to put a bow on this from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that, the way that we approach things can be seen as us making it miserable or coming from a place of help and support. And so I would just say, it's an invitation to have a conversation, really seek to understand what the motives are, what the intents are, to try to get to some common ground between the manager HR relationship to be able to have an effective partnership to achieve, what both parties are there to accomplish together.
Barbie, your thoughts on this
You know,
topic?
yeah, I mean, I think everything, that Angela said, and also really try to have a great working relationship with your executive team and understand that HR, as an HR leader, you will not be successful at anything you do if they're not doing it with you, right? OKRs. If I can go out and tell people to complete their OKRs all day long, but if their leadership in their department's not doing it as well and doing their own and pushing it down, then I won't be successful in that process. So help your executive team also understand that, hey, look, if you guys aren't in this battle with me, then we're not going to battle,
Yeah.
right?
That
Like
Yep.
you need to care enough about this too. You can't put me out there alone because it is lonely in that role as an HR person. You've got to have your first team, which is the executive team, with you on your journey.
That's actually a really good point. I really like that. I would say that the thing that you need to keep in mind is, as an HR person, you are not the police. You are not in charge of the organization. You don't have all this organizational power. You shouldn't feel like you're sort of carried away with your position and what you do. You need to remember that I'm only successful because I know how to use informal influence. I don't manage anybody. I don't do anybody's, employee review, outside of my team. Everything that I have that I work with outside of HR is because I have strong influencing skills and people want to work with me because I work fairly with them. We make the right decisions and we collaborate together. So if you do those things, you're not going to make people miserable. If you're in HR, people are going to want to work with you and collaborate with you, and they're going to remember that when they come to you, that's how you operate. So that's my 2 cents.
I like it.
All
Yeah,
right.
me too.
Thank you. And I think this was a great topic. And
Yes.
we look forward to talking again next week.
Can
All
I add
right.
one thing? To
Yes.
anyone who ever works for any company that I'm working for or with, if I'm making you miserable, tell me. I will try to do better.
Oh, I have a bunch of emails I need to forward to you then.
That's an
Totally kidding.
invitation. Wow.
Totally kidding. Totally kidding.
Uh,
No. But I can't imagine that for Barbie or Angela or Heather. They are all wonderful. Those emails probably all have my name on them. But anyway, all right. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
see you
Thank
next week.
you.
All right, I'll
Thank
see you
you.
next year. I'll talk later. All right, bye-bye.